Howdy folks, and welcome to the Hillbilly Kitchen. Today we're talking about sourdough starter. I have Bethany here with me from Shady Homestead. She's actually my neighbor from just down the road, and she has been teaching sourdough starter classes for...
since the beginning of this year, so we've had about 12.
So I'm new to this, and I thought it would be beneficial to have somebody here who knew what they were doing, because I messed up my starter when I first started. So she's going to tell us what I did wrong, and she's going to tell us how not to do that. Mm-hmm. So anyway, what is a sourdough starter?
So the sourdough starter, this is my starter that I made up from my house. And it is basically just made from whole wheat flour and water. And a sourdough starter is essentially cultivated wild yeast, and then it's also lactobacillus bacteria. And the combination of those two things is what we use as a leavening for bread. And this was, the original, this is how people used to make bread before there was commercialized yeast. So the wild yeast in here is what gives your bread the rise, because when yeast eats sugar, they will give off carbon dioxide, and that's where you get the bubbles, and you get the rise out of that. And now the bacteria in here is beneficial because it actually, when it eats, it gives off alcohol. And so the alcohol is what gives your bread that sour taste that everybody loves. And then it also creates an environment for your sourdough starter to where you don't have bad things grow in it. So you don't have mold, and you don't have bad bacteria to grow in there and ruin it. So it's very beneficial for that. And it's also good that we eat these things because, it's good for your gut health.
Yeah, we spend a fortune on probiotics, and sourdough has probiotics in it already. Mm-hmm. So, and that's part of what's wrong with our digestive system, is our diet doesn't have that stuff in it anymore. Yeah. We used to eat all kind of fermented foods, pickles and sauerkraut and pickled everything. Mm-hmm. Yep. I remember pickled eggs were big because when the chickens laid more than what they could eat, they'd pickle a bunch of them, and we don't get that anymore. So okay, so what I did wrong is I was in a panic because we just finished a video on making sourdough bread for y'all, and I started thinking about how many loaves I was going to have to make, and I had plenty of starter to make them anyway, but I divided my starter and I fed it too soon. And if you feed it too soon, it don't like it. You get the water on the top, but you can see I do have a crown trying to form there. Yeah. And you want it to bubble up and make a little dome, not a crown, a dome. You want a dome in the middle. But when you feed it too soon, it looks like this. Mm-hmm. It should look like that, not have the water on top. But this is okay if you do this, but don't panic and think you're not going to have enough, because a little bit really does go a long way. Yes. We use 60 grams in a loaf. Mm-hmm. Well, I used 80 because I strained mine out a little bit, but it still worked. I mean, it looked like this, and it made loaves like this. Mm-hmm. But if you want to make a pretty loaf, don't overfeed it, and it'll look like that. Okay, so how do we feed this?
Okay, so for your starter, there's a couple of important things that I like to go over, and this is really something that, people are always afraid, I'm going to kill it. And I'll just tell you, it's hard to kill. It's pretty resilient. I've had people have their starter sitting in the oven and accidentally preheat it.
Oh my gosh.
Because it had been cold.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh gosh, I've killed Fred. And but then the next day they're like, I got just a little bit out of the middle that hadn't baked, and they brought it back to life. So, but there are a few things that can affect your starter and can weaken it or kill it. The main thing is that you really don't want to use city water. I've never tested it, but that's just something that I wouldn't do. If you can use filtered water or spring water, or I have well water, locally, and that's what I use. So.
Well water tastes so much better. I wish we had it here, but I've got city water, so I always filter it. And I've said this before, and I don't think I said it in our bread video that we just did. use filtered water whenever you're baking, because it doesn't matter if you're using sourdough or some other kind of leavening, yeast, or even baking soda and baking powder. The filtered water works better in your baking for sure.
For sure, really does. So that's one thing. And then there's another thing, like, you know, the yeast in here likes a warmer temperature, but like, don't set your starter in the sun, because that's just too hot, and it can kill it, it can weaken it. Also, and I know this from experience, don't set it in the oven and have the lights on, because those are warmer than you think they would be. And I've done that with dough, because it was like super cold outside, thinking that it needed that, and I left it overnight, like we baked that bread, and it was just a soppy mess in the morning, so it was way overproofed. So those are a couple things, but mostly, you know, it's pretty hard to kill, so don't be too freaked out about it. So the way that we're going to do this, so this is Fred, and if you want to, if you're baking with him actively, you can leave him on the counter. You can put it on top of the fridge. That's a good spot, especially in the winter, to have a little bit more warmth, but not too much. But if you have him out of the refrigerator and active, then you want to feed this once a day, okay? And I'll show you guys how to feed it in just a minute. And if you're going to be out of town, or if you just need a break, or I have a lot of students that like to bake on the weekends. So like, they will put their starter in the fridge and then pull it out like Friday, feed it and get it ready, and then they'll make their dough Saturday. So it's something that, you know, you can feed it every day, but if you don't have the time, or if that's too much of a commitment, you can put it in the fridge, and that makes it pretty dormant as far as fermentation goes. It will still ferment a little, but it'll be really slow. Now, if you have it stored in the fridge, and he's in the fridge for a week, and you're not going to get him out and use him that week, you do need to discard and feed your starter once a week if it's in the fridge. If it's on the counter, once a day.
So even if you're not baking, you want to feed it once a week. And if you're baking, leave it out, and you can feed it every day, and you can bake with it every day. And even though that doesn't look like much in this jar here, I mean, you can kind of see it's only up to the band there. That would do probably 2 loaves of bread if you weren't, So it just doesn't take it much. No.
I have a bit, Fred, this is like a double feeding, because I use a lot of discard for recipes and stuff. So I keep him bigger than I normally would a normal starter. So the feeding process looks like this. I'm just going to show you guys. This is a starter that it's been a day since it's been fed. So this is, it's dropped down. It did go up to about here, so a little bit more than doubled. And so this is fell down because it's hungry. So
okay, so that's how you know when it's time to feed. You wait until it falls, then you feed it.
Yes.
I didn't do that.
So that's what happened with yours. You just fed it too fast, and that's just water separation. So there's nothing wrong. Like, hers will be just fine.
It actually, I cooked with it like this. I mean, so, I didn't have any choice.
Yes.
She didn't get here till 10 o'clock, and we'd have been at midnight getting all this ready.
Okay. So for your feeding process, you always remember that when you feed your starter, you always discard from the jar first. And this is and some people weigh it. There's a million ways that you can do all of this stuff. This is just the way that I do it, and that works for me. But you basically I just eyeball this. You can wait if you want to, but I just pour off about half the volume.
This is not as picky as the bread. That we weighed the bread, because if you weigh it, it is consistent every time.
Yes, that you do want to weigh. So that's all you do. And now this is what then we would call discard. And the discard, you can keep it if you want to. I don't like to waste stuff. There's all kinds of recipes. We have sourdough chocolate chip cookies. We have sourdough banana bread. You can make pancakes. You can make sandwich bread with it. There's all kinds of things you can use it for. If you choose to keep it, what I normally do is use like a quart jar, and I just add to my discard every day, and just put that in the fridge with the lid a little bit loose, and then you can pull it out and use it for those other recipes.
And now what this will do, because you're not feeding it anymore, it's not going to give you leavening. So you're going to use regular yeast, or you're going to use baking powder or baking soda or something with it. But it will do a very similar thing in your baking to what buttermilk would do. So it will give it a good flavor, and it will improve the texture.
Yes.
But if you're not going to feed this, if you're just going to keep it in a jar to add into other recipes, it's not going to make it rise up.
No, that is not active. So that is so discard is basically inactive sourdough starter. And you know, it's just in different states. It's the same stuff as this. It's just in a different state. So after you discard, you will feed this, and this is the way that I've started Fred. You can do this in grams if you want to. I normally just do a measuring cup because that's just how I started it with. But we want to do about 1/3 cup of your filtered water, and then I do about a 1/2 cup of your unbleached flour. You want to make sure that you're feeding this unbleached flour.
Unbleached all-purpose flour.
All-purpose, yes.
Yes. Or you can use bread flour too.
You can use bread flour, yeah.
But don't use self-rising, and don't use anything bleached in your starter.
Added to that, so you don't want to weaken it at all.
The bleach, if you use bleached flour, it can even kill it, and it will definitely weaken it.
Yes.
So make sure it's unbleached, whether it's all-purpose or bread. Either one will work.
And now you just want to stir this up real good, and that kind of gets that air in there because the yeast and the bacteria likes oxygen, and just kind of scrape down the sides, and then that's it. Like that's the process.
And you want to wait 10 hours or so, 8 to 10 hours at least.
So there's a lot of variables. Generally 8 to 10 hours, and it should be doubled. And what I do, you want to just mark that where it's at when you feed it. And then what I would suggest doing is do a little experiment in your house, because everybody's house, the humidity might be different, the temperature's going to be different. So you mark that, and then I would check it in, say, 6 hours, see where it's at, 8 hours, and then you kind of will know when when you go to feed it, when you need to feed it. But you want this to double in volume, so that's how you know. And you will see like tons of bubbles all through there. And like Becky said, there'll be kind of a dome on top, and there are lots of gas in there.
Yeah, and once it doubles, then you can use it to bake with. But you want to plan at least 6 hours, probably closer to 8 hours before you bake with it. And like right now, you don't want to use it because it's weak. We've just cut it in half. It doesn't have enough bacteria in it, and your bread won't rise, or enough. Well, bacteria,
Both,
yeast, the yeast and the bacteria, there's not enough of it in there.
Yep.
So give it a few hours for sure. If you're planning on baking, like if you want to get up Saturday morning and bake, feed it Friday evening.
Yep.
And then Saturday morning it'll be ready to go. If you want to bake Sunday after church, feed it. If you want to bake Sunday after church, probably would want to feed it
probably early Sunday morning.
Real early,
Saturday night.
Like right before you go to bed Saturday night, or real early Sunday morning, and then you can bake Sunday afternoon.
Yep.
Bethany started a home bakery, and I've taught y'all about that before. And if I wasn't doing this, that would be what I would do. I would have a home bakery. It's an excellent opportunity for stay-at-home moms. There's a lot of work at home scams, but a home bakery is not one of them. Now, it does require some initiative for sure. I mean, she sells at
Hometown Produce.
She bakes stuff and takes it in there and sells it. She also does orders.
I do special orders.
You can email her or message her on Facebook and say, hey, I've got a party coming up. I need whatever, and she'll make it for you if it's something. Everybody has their scope. I'm sure there's things you don't do.
Yeah, there's things I don't do.
Alex keeps trying to get me to do wedding cakes, and I'm like, no, that I would not ever do that.
No.
Brides are mean.
I'm rustic, very rustic. So
yeah, and that's I mean, rustic is good, and if you stay rustic, if it's not perfect, like this is not. But this is still
it's good.
Very much what people expect. So a rustic bakery is an excellent idea.
Yes.
But if you're looking for something to do to make a living and you've got kids, an at-home bakery is an excellent plan. And you don't need a lot of money to start it. You just start. She now does classes. If you're local, you can find her on Facebook, and we're going to have links in the description of this. And you can do a class. She does sourdough starter, butter.
I do cultured butter. I do canning classes. We're about to have the first one this Saturday. And I'm doing some other, like some sourdough, more advanced sourdough classes. And we're going to do a discard class, which I think will be really fun. And then we're going to do a sourdough focaccia class, so that's coming up. So
what is sourdough focaccia?
Focaccia is like an Italian bread. And it's like super
okay,
bubbly,
all right,
with olive oil and stuff. It's really good, so.
Okay, I know what it is. Anyway, so, and that's something I've also said, that if you have a skill and you share it, it grows. It's that the biblical concept of sowing and reaping. So by sharing that, she's growing her skill, and also the skills that she is teaching are skills that have just about been lost. And a lot of people are into homesteading now. They are into being just more self-sufficient. And not all of us have a big farm, obviously, where we can have giant gardens or we can have, livestock and stuff. But we can all learn to be just a little bit more self-sufficient for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
And, we all learned that that's kind of necessary in the past few years. I mean, we certainly all needed some Fred over here when the yeast shortage hit. Of course, we also needed a wheat field. There was no flour. But, if you happen to be local, definitely check out her classes. If you haven't subscribed to the channel and click the notification bell, make sure you do, and check out the sourdough bread video. I'm going to link it in the end of this, so there'll be a thing you can just click on if you're watching on your TV or whatever. You can click on it at the end of the video. I'll put that card in there. But this is a hobby. It's a skill. And, it's more than something to just pass the time. And the starter is something that you can share. Like when this discard, you can feed that and pass it on.
Yeah, for sure. Gift it.
Again, the sowing and reaping, and then somebody else will pass it on. And people will have the ability to make this beautiful bread and all these other treats. And so it's definitely something that's worthwhile, and you have something new that you're doing now with the starter.
So we are newly dehydrating Fred, so that means I'm just drying active Fred out, active starter, and then we are able to, we can ship that now. So you would get, dry Fred basically, and I would send you really easy instructions how to reactivate Fred, and then you would have your starter. And that's, that dehydrated starter it's not going to go bad, like it's good and can be shipped and things like that, so it's just easier. So
okay,
yes.
And something you can start this, like she said, with whole wheat flour and but it takes months to get it mature, and some of us have a lack of commitment. And we would starve our starter to death before it ever got mature. I think you told me it took you 9 months to get it.
About 8 or 9 months before I started having bread
consistent results.
Real good. And I mean, people go home from the class, bake their first loaf of bread, and I'm like jealous because it's like it took me 8 months.
The loaf I baked Sunday was prettier than these because I hadn't watered my starter down yet. So, but
it makes a huge, like, I feel like having a good mature starter gives you such a leg up. Like if I had known what I know now, I would have
bought it. And it does change the flavor of it. If you start with a starter where you're just feeding the flour and you're doing that until you get it,
it takes a while.
It takes a while to get the right flavor, and this has a very good flavor. I've already passed some of it around, and everybody loves it. It does have that sour bite, but it's mild. It doesn't like kick you. I've eaten sourdough bread before. You're like, Somebody pass the water.
Yeah.
Did you spill vinegar in this? But it's when it's mature, it has a very good flavor. So we're gonna have, like I said before, links to Bethany's Facebook page, and we will have an email address.
Yeah, I have email and a Google number that they
and
can
a
text
Google
or
number
call.
that you can text or call, and she will get the starter out to you if you want to try some of hers. It is excellent. I have used it. I have baked with it. I mean, even watered down it does this. So,
Thank you.
and I looked on the internet. It can be pricey.
Yeah.
It can be.
Yeah, it can be.
And you don't need a whole lot to start this. I mean, if you got a mason jar and the starter, you can start it. And we showed some tools in the other video, the baskets and things like that you can get. But you don't have to have any of that. You really don't. You can mix it up with whatever you got and put it in a bowl. I mean, and it works. And you don't even have to have a Dutch oven to do it, which a Dutch oven does work best to bake these loaves. But if you're interested in this, contact Bethany. I don't have the stuff here, so it's not going to do you any good to ask me to mail it. But I'll have links to her stuff. Do you want to give people your Facebook name page and stuff real quick, and they can look it up?
So on Facebook, our page is the Shady Homestead. Okay, and I think that's all they should need, because if you pull that page up, it's my email address is under it and my Google number's under it, and you can just message us on there too.
Okay, so that's how you can find our Facebook. So look, and we will have a link so you can click on it in the description. But if you're watching on your TV or something, you can look it up on your phone. Is there anything else that?
Yeah, that's taking care of that.
And if you're local, go down the produce market and you can get some of her Bethany's bread, her cookies, her banana bread. She takes cobblers down. Those cobblers look good. I can't believe you didn't bring me a cobbler for lunch.
I'm so sorry. I will bring you one the next time I bake them.
Right.
Yeah, they're real good though.
Really, that's all right. And I do appreciate this. I appreciate you helping me getting started in this, and I appreciate you sharing it with our viewers.
I enjoy it. So thank you so much for inviting me.
I'm really glad you came, and I hope y'all enjoyed this. If you really, really enjoyed this sourdough stuff, we might be able to talk her into coming back again.
Yeah, you're right down the road. So
yeah, she lives past me, so she has to go past me to go to town.
Yeah.
Before we go, I just want to leave you with a quick verse. 2 Corinthians 9:10. Now he that ministereth seed to the sower, both ministereth bread for your food, and multiplieth your seed sown, and increase the fruit of your righteousness. And that's kind of the story of being a Christian, and it's kind of the story of sharing our food. And when you share food with people, I said this is something that you can share your discard. You don't have to keep it to bake with. You can share it, and it grows it, and it will grow your circle of friends. It will grow your faith. It will grow your and sharing your knowledge grows your knowledge. So sow those seeds, share your faith, share your food. A lot of people think that sharing food is like, we're making somebody something, baking them something. It's, I do up food at Christmas time and stuff.
I think it's
because
wonderful.
You're sharing your love.
Yeah.
And baking something for somebody really is loving them. And that's what we're supposed to do as Christians.
Yes.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Becky.
And thank you all so much for joining us at the Hillbilly Kitchen. If you hadn't already, click that like and subscribe button. Click that notification bell. Go check out the sourdough bread. And until next time, remember to put God first.